Hello, fellow Trekkies and Trekkers. Well, a look at Star Trek Deep Space Nine Season 2 now continues on with the episode Second Sight. Up late. Hold on. Okay. Up late, Jake Sisko can't sleep. He had a nightmare he is reluctant to share with his father, but eventually reveals it was about running around the corridors of the station, unable to find his father. Once he feels better, he returns to sleep, adding a footnote he misses his mother. Commander Sisko, however, still can't sleep. He wanders around the darkened and empty promenade, looking out the window and counting the stars. A mysterious woman comes up behind him and talks to him about the stars for a while. She introduces herself as Fenna and seems to take an interest in him. They talk for a while about the station. She doesn't say much about herself, but that she can't stay here long. As he's offering to show around the station, she disappears. Next morning ops, Commander Sisko seems to feel more alive than he did last night, even ordering a different drink. Charlton tea with a double twist of lemon instead of the Ragtagino he usually takes to start every day for the last year. Major Kieran Reese notices this and is surprised. Lieutenant Jadzia Dax calls on the comm and asks him to meet Professor Gideon Sietek, a terraformer and an extreme egomaniac, but charming. He arrived to the station in the USS Prometheus for an experimental attempt at reigniting a dead sun, Epsilon 119. He's more than excited and optimistic about his experiment. Dax reminds him it's just a theory, but he brushes it off. Soon, while Commander Sisko is gazing out of the window again, Fenna reappears and asks if his invitation to tour the station is still open. He says it is and shows her around. In one of the upper pylons, looking at the view of the station, Joy seems to say exactly the right thing. When he asks about her, she can't say much, and she runs off right away. When she gets to the turbo lift, she's gone. At dinner in his quarters, when Sisko was unable to concentrate on Jake's anecdote, he concludes his father is in love. As he points out, he's showing all three of the signs according to Nog: loss of appetite, daydreaming, smiling all the time. When Jake asks about her, Sisko is at a loss of words to describe her. Sisko next goes to see Odo in the security office to have him try to find Fenna. He's also unable to describe her to him. The description is vague at best, but Odo will do what he can. Later, Dax takes him aside, wanting to know what's going on. As she saw the two of them on the promenade, she reminds him that, even if she's a female now, Sisko still cares on all about his love interests. Sisko assures her it's too early to talk about it. Before the dinner, the professor is charming as always, even if a bit self-congratulatory, and dominates the conversation. Sietek explains the process of how the star will be reignited in addition to his projects. Julien Bajir remarks on Sietek's work so far on Lagobus 10 and 9-volume autobiography, One for All of his marriages. He jokes. Meanwhile, his wife, Nadel, has been preparing the meal, yet to meet the crew. After a while, Sietek goes to check on her, and she comes out to greet the crew. Surprisingly, she looks just like Fenna. Now we have something to talk about, Dax quietly tells Sisko. Toward the end of the dinner, Sietek details a stew recipe which she perfected after 9 years. Nadel, however, does not seem enthused about the dinner. Sisko whispers to Dax that she's pretending not to recognize him. When he asks her about talking to him, she knows nothing about what he's talking about. She doesn't know who Fenna is either, but she's quite defensive. As Sisko and Dax return to the station, Sisko says he is convinced it's her. Odo, however, soon informs him that he couldn't find her after checking all the logs. Sisko tells him not to bother, saying he did, aboard the Prometheus. Odo is perplexed. He says that no one has left the Prometheus except for the professor. She also doesn't show up the next day. Sisko is puzzled. Quark offers to talk to him, recognizing the "I've been stood up" look, but Sisko declines. When he enters his quarters, she suddenly appears and embraces him. He asks her about Nadel, but she has never heard of her either. She doesn't have a twin sister, and she's still hesitant to say where she came from or who she really is. Her only reply is that she thought she was looking for a place, but she was really looking for him. After he kisses her, she suddenly fades out of existence, as if she were not corporeal. Sisko becomes distraught. Aww. After Chief Mouse O'Brien and Dax reconfigure the Prometheus' warp drive, Sisko comes to travel along with Sietek's team and his wife. Dax doesn't think it's a good idea, but Sisko says he needs answers. En route to the bridge, Dax works with Commanding Officer Pearsall, and Sisko talks with Professor Sietek. He talks about himself on the way there. He has the expectation to keep outdoing himself, quoting Klingon poet Gatrog, who wrote in The Fall of Kang about a warrior having slain all his enemies. The talk turns to how he met Nadell. She was the daughter of a dignitary, and she was infatuated with him from the moment she met him. He was the first one to take her off-world, and he would give up the entire universe for her. When the Prometheus arrives at the Dead Star, Sisko suddenly sees Fenna in his quarters. He immediately calls for Dax. When Dax scans, there is no matter there, just energy. Fenna is frightened, but Sisko takes her hands and wants to help find out what's going on. The three go to Nadell's quarters, where they find Sietek frantic over her condition. She won't wake up. Dax finds she is in shock. When Sietek sees Fenna, he recognizes her and knows exactly what happened. Fenna is surprised. Okay. Fenna doesn't understand, but Sietek is outraged, as if under the impression Fenna would never return to them. The professor explains Fenna is an illusion created by Nadell's unconscious mind. She's a psychoprojective telepath, and has obviously produced Fenna before. According to Dax's scans, there was a lot of energy coming from Nadell's occipital lobe. Dax doesn't believe she can survive more than an hour or two. She also doesn't believe she can do anything about it, despite Sietek's insistence. Sisko has Dax take Fenna outside, and Sisko talks to Sietek. All the charm fades from him as he explains what's going on. Nadell doesn't know what's happening. She's unconscious, and this happens when her species have strong emotions. All of his wives, he says, have trouble with him after a while. They hate him in the end as much as they love him in the beginning. Nadell can never leave him because her species, the Holonans, made for life. Sisko then goes to talk to Fenna and explains this to her. She can't believe it and doesn't want to die. Sisko promises to remember her and that it's a dream. Daxon calls from the bridge and says that Sietek has launched a shuttle pod with himself on it. Pearsall has open communications with Sietek, and Sisko tries to convince him to turn around. However, Sietek says he is freeing Nadell forever, and not just from her current predicament, but from her mating obligation. He cheerfully says he has even written his own obituary, which he would like Sisko to take to the Daystrom Institute. He promises to send it off. Exclaiming, "Let there be light," Sietek's shuttle impacts the star and is reignited. Then, Fenna disappears from the bridge. Nadell says goodbye and thanks Sisko. She says she'll probably stay in her homeworld, New Helena, for the rest of her life, and wishes she could remember Fenna, but she can't. Before she leaves, she asks Sisko what Fenna was like, and is told she was just like you. Aww, poor Sisko. So anyway, let's take a look at some background information with this episode, beginning with story and script. Mark Giordano's original pitch for this episode involved Bashir meeting a mysterious woman who keeps disappearing. He goes to his colleague's freight and tracking her down, but he discovers that no one aboard the station has ever seen her except himself, and as such, he has to unravel the mystery alone, as his crewmates begin to think he's imagining the whole thing. Bashir ultimately discovers that the woman is in fact a projection by a woman who was abused by her husband. This original version of the story was more of an adventure/mystery than a romance. Changing the story to focus on Sisko rather than Bashir was Michael Pillar's idea, because he felt that the Sisko character had become far too aloof, and he saw this episode as a way to humanize him. According to Ira Stephen Bear, quote, "During the second season, Michael kept saying, 'Let's define Sisko.' That's when he and I had conversations about making Sisko the builder, on establishing the difference between him and Picard, the explorer. Sisko is a builder. He stays with the project until the finish. That helped us to see Sisko in a lot of different ways. He's a guy who's solid and real and human." The writers felt that giving Sisko a romance would help them to better define the character, and would help the audience to better connect with him on an emotional level. Mm-hmm. Swiatek was based on director John Huston. The poem referenced by both Swiatek and Sisko is called The Fall of Kang, and it's implied that the poem was about Kang's last great battle. However, 10 episodes later in Blood Oath, Kang turns up on DS9 alive and well. The Kang in the poem is apparently a different Kang. According to Robert Hewitt Wolf, Swiatek's terraforming technology is based upon the Genesis device as seen in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Quote, it was established Federation terraforming technology. Of course, the Genesis device didn't work, but obviously Swiatek's work is built upon the research of previous scientists, and it was a nice way to reference the movie. Let's take a look at a note about the production. Dan Curry and Gary Hutzel used a blue screen effect to show Deep Space Nine from Sisko and Fennis' perspective from a viewing port in an upper pylon. And now finally, on to some trivia surrounding this episode. This episode marks the first appearance of USS Prometheus in Star Trek. Although the Nebula class is externally smaller to the Galaxy class, not a single piece of any standing set from the Next Generation appeared. The wall size Swiatek's quarters is a single length of stock Starfleet wall, built specifically for DS9 scenes. Swiatek's quarters are a brand new set built from the remains of the runabout aft section seen in Timescape, and the bridge is a redress of the USS Excelsior Bridge, set from Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country, combining its forward and aft walls. The smaller Starship Bridge continued to be seen throughout the series as the bridge of various ships, both Federation and not. A later period in the Jem'Hadar as the bridge of the USS Odyssey. This is the first episode of the series to be directed by Alexander Singer. This episode takes place on the 4th anniversary of the Battle of Wolf 359, although the start of the episode does not correspond to the anniversary. Swiatek's last words, "Let there be light," comes from Genesis 1, Chapter 3 of the Bible. The dress worn by Fennis, reused and worn by Antonia in Star Trek Generations, and Leosa, Barclay's seducer, in Inside Man. The concept of reigniting a dying sun was explored in Half a Life. Roxanne suggested to Odo that an upper pylon would be a good place for the picnic in The Forsaken, much as Fennis suggested Sisko in this episode. So overall, I think this is a pretty darn good episode, and I do like the fact that Sisko actually had a love story going on, even though the fact that it didn't go so well. So yeah. So overall, I give the episode Second Sight 4 warp cores out of 5. One way to tune in a bit is we take a look at the next episode, Sanctuary. So, until then, live long and prosper, everybody.